Protestant Reformation, or Protestant Reformation. So, the Protestant Reformation, it was a grassroots movement whose goal was to reform the Catholic Church. And it was started by just a lowly theology professor at a college by the name of Martin Luther. He was just a teacher who was like, enough is enough with this crazy Catholic Church stuff. The critics of the church, this is what they claimed. They said the church leaders were corrupt. The popes who ruled during the Renaissance patronized the arts, something they did not like, spent extravagantly on personal pleasure, which is not something you're supposed to do in the Bible and in the Christian faith, and fought wars. Not good. It was thou shalt not kill commandment. And here's a bad one. Pope Alexander, for one of them, Pope Alexander VI, for example, admitted that he had fathered several children. Not good at all. Many popes were busy pursuing worldly affairs to have much time for spiritual duties. They just weren't interested in the basic bedrock of the religion that had made it so successful in the first place. The lower clergy, they were so poorly educated they could scarcely read, nonetheless teach others to read as well. I mean, others broke their priestly vows by marrying, and some drank and gambled in a very bad way. When Martin Luther originally made his kind of pilgrimage to Rome for the first time, he saw things that he did not like, including prostitution, gambling, and that was one of the main reasons that kind of triggered his change to start this whole Lutheran Protestant movement. So after he went to Rome, he got pretty mad. He wrote the 95 Theses, and the main argument was the church needed to become more moral. People took to it like something people take to. For example, if your mom puts out pancakes, those pancakes were the 95 Theses. People ran to those 95 Theses. They're like, this makes a lot of sense. And so the church, they did not like it because they were being questioned. The status quo in that time was being threatened. The boat was being rocked, and they did not like. They excommunicated Luther. They burned all his books, all his writings down to the ground, and they tried to anyway, because in response to a papal bull sent out ordering the excommunication and the subsequent trial of Worms, Luther stood by his work and refused to recant anything, which was pretty incredible because he went directly against the authority of the Pope, and the people who supported him, especially in places like Germany, they were so happy with him. They were like, my hero, I love this man. He's one of the best. And the peasants revolted in 1525, and this was actually for quite a long time. The Treaty of Augsburg eventually went on to take place, in which people or rulers were essentially allowed to decide whether or not they wanted to become or depart from the Catholic faith and become Protestant, which was the Luther approach. That is something they did quite. That's something they viewed as quite a victory. It was a long struggle to get there. The priest kind of had, the lords kind of had a negotiation with the emperor, and the emperor said, "Okay, fine." They came to this negotiation. They came to this agreement, and that was a very big deal. But that took a lot of peasants revolting almost for a decade. And Luther, he had to, if you remember the long movie some of you may have watched in Global, he had to be kind of excommunicated. The German prince kind of had to scoop him up to save him from the Pope, who was really out for blood. And in that time, he translated the Bible into German. He wrote wrote the New Testament in German. And he was like, the people need to understand the Bible for themselves here. The peasants revolt. Luther gets very mad. He said of the peasants that they were murderers and thieves because they were just attacking everyone. Obviously, God not condoning violence, Jesus not condoning violence, so he was kind of in the right there. You can't use violence to solve all your issues. Violence, never the answer. So he came out against that. Then the Treaty of Augsburg took place, and then the idea of Protestant Christianity was more broadly accepted. Another part of the Protestant faith was in Switzerland, where John Calvin, a quiet boy, he grew up to study law and philosophy in the University of Paris. He was influenced by the French followers of Luther. He was like, hey, this Luther, this Protestantism, this moral Christianity, it's pretty cool. And after his mentor was killed in a big war between the Roman Catholic Church and the Swiss Protestants, he led the Reformation in Switzerland. He founded a theocracy. When Calvin arrived in 1540s, Geneva was a self-governing city. He and his followers ran the city according to very strict rules. Everyone attended religion class. No one wore bright clothing or played card games. Had no fun at all. Authorities would imprison, excommunicate, or banish anyone who broke those rules. Anyone who preached different doctrines might be burned at the stake. But to Protestants, Calvin's Geneva was a model city full of model citizens who pretty much had the right idea about things. So that was John Calvin. When you think of John Calvin, you think of Switzerland, and you think of morals. Morals, very important. So let's go quickly over some vocabulary. Heretic. Heretic was a big term used in the whole Martin Luther debacle. It's one person who challenges the teaching of the church, and Martin Luther certainly did that, as well as Calvin to some degree. And indulgences is a pardon releasing someone from a sin that must be bought. And it was one of the big problems that Luther had with the church. Like, this is not okay. The church is just profiting off of this. There's a bunch of people buying these. It's not cool at all. Obviously, the printing press was something that typed words down onto paper to make a text of some sort in a very efficient way. Those are some of the main terms that you need to know from the Renaissance. Now we go to the effects of the Renaissance. And in the end, with the Protestant Reformation, things got pretty chaotic. What we knew was there was some pretty crazy amounts of violence for the peasant revolt, and some fighting after that to decide whether some countries would be Protestant or would they be fall under the Catholic rule of the Roman Catholic religion of the Church. Also, soon after the Catholic Church deemed Martin Luther a Protestant, Europe became kind of divided along confessional as well as territorial lines. The religious turmoil of the period led to warfare within a lot of states. Whether it be England, whether it be Germany, whether it be France, people all had to decide how they would fall. And France and England had some fighting for a little bit, somewhere in there, called the 100 Years' War. As that developed, that was actually before the Renaissance. But the key thing was, though, Christianity was not united. They were not together as they once were. Martin Luther, John Calvin, they all changed that. There as many different sects form, and there still are many sects today. Some even started in America. In the point when Christians came over to America, they formed their own sects too. So there was a lot of changing, a lot of splintering as the religion that started as one at around the point of the Crusades splintered out into many different branches. That was one of the bigger effects of the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, as well as there was a lot of splintering and division from it as well. But on the up hand, though, the church did become more moral, which is another nice thing. Always good to have more morality. All right, so before we stop this podcast, before we press stop on the recording, here's the quiz structure. It's going to be 75 minutes, 20 multiple choice, including map questions, which will be 40 points. It'll be writing as well as annotations outlining. We're now going to move on to the podcast Empires and Explorers. This is the overseas exploration, the beginning of that. Welcome, everyone. It is time for the next episode of Global Empires. This is Unit 7. Welcome to this Global Review podcast. Today, we are going to get you ready for the quiz, and it's 30 minutes, so it's not going to take up the whole class period. I may do some homework after, I don't know. 30 minutes, 30 multiple choice with map questions, and there will be some document questions as well based on this. So we're going to try to do our best to prepare you for this. And how about we start with some study strategies? And first, we will go over some of the things we're going to be covering in this episode. Today, we're going to talk about the rise of the Mongols and the Yuan dynasty, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the Ming dynasty, the development of nation-states and the exploration age, as well as the empires of the Aztec and the Inca, colonialism, and finally, slavery and the devastating impacts it had on Africa. All right, so that is what we have in the books for you today. So, let us start right now. And we will be starting with today map questions. Some of the things you're going to want to know are the oceans, where the oceans are, and some key points along the maps as well. I'm going to tell you about where those are, and also going to need to be able to locate some empires on the map as well. So, Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean, you're going to need to know where that is right around the area, pretty much under India. The Atlantic Ocean is, pretty much everyone should probably know where that is. The Pacific Ocean, Caribbean Sea you're also going to need to look at, as well as Cape Horn, Hispaniola, which is an island in the Caribbean, Cuba, the Strait of Magellan, or the Line of Demarcation, the Treaty of Tordesillas, and how the Pope impacted colonization with his Treaty of Tordesillas, or formation of the Line of Demarcation, West Indies, you need to know where that is, as well as Brazil and the Cape of Good Hope. Some other places you're going to need to know in the East Indies. You need to know Java, Philippine Islands, as well as the Spice Islands, and Calicut. As you can also need to, the Cape of Good Hope is one of the most southern tips of Africa, where the Da Gama rounded to form a new route to the East Indies that was a little bit more successful than Christopher Columbus's was. So, yeah, also you're going to need to know the Iberian Peninsula, which is going to be Spain, Portugal, that kind of thing. And also going to need to know where the Ming, Ottoman, Aztec, and Incan empires are located. So also going to need to know the routes of the explorers, Columbus and Magellan, Diaz, Cabral, and Da Gama. So those are going to be some other good things to know. As well, as that does seem pretty good. So we're going to now move on to the Mongols, and we're going to take a look in depth about what's going on with them. And one of the big things about these units is, as I'm sure you are aware, the shifting of power. And the power, if you had to find power, the ability to do what you want with little to no resistance. That's pretty much the definition of power there. Your performance and position of power, how you rule, and whether people are satisfied with your performance could be factors in the influencing the shift of power at that time. And what causes a region's power to wax or wane could be whether or not they're possibly threatened by some external or internal sources. There's going to be a lot of power shifting throughout this episode today. All right, so yeah, the Mongol Empire is one of the biggest, most vast, expansive empires, extending all the way from China and Beijing, extending through parts of Russia and all the way to Constantinople, and stretching into points of Eastern Europe or Northeastern Europe there. Really quite a stretch there. Some of the places conquered were Russia, Baghdad, Persia, and China. Some of the places that escaped that area were India, France, Italy, Egypt, and Japan. Japan was another big one of how that all turned out. So, yeah, their home was the Mongolian steppes with wide and open grassland. They were originally nomadic herders who lived in portable huts called yurts. Yeah, there was highly effective low technology. It was pretty much a story of the high-tech, low-tech. Was pretty much the story behind Mongolians. Their tribal technology was similar to that of steppe nomads, but their weapons, the weapons their blacksmiths made on portable anvils and forges were relatively crude. And the Mongols also acquired by plunder, tribute, and trade high-quality weapons made by urban artisans. The bow was the Mongols' probably their most important weapon. It had a pull of up to 160 pounds in a range of up to 350 yards, and they can put that arrow with poison. They can make flaming arrows or whatever. Really quite some stuff. Something that could ignite a fire. It's pretty much like dropping a grenade in there. That would be really quite cool. So a stone